Um, our moderator for this session is Mr. Maulik Chokshi, the Global Director, Health Systems Research and Policy, Access Health International, and a leader in health systems initiatives in India. His particular love for economics and finance is something that gives me always, since I don't enjoy finance, I always look up to him in awe. So, Maulik, yours to moderate. Um, I have the privilege of introducing the founding partner of Mondilate Impact, founder and CEO of IDFC Bank in India, uh, an illustrious career of almost over 4 decades of experience in looking at banking, financing, innovative financing, and climate financing, sustainable and impact investing, microfinancing, capital markets, and public policy research. I invite Mr. Rajiv Lal to the dais for the keynote address. I'm also going to introduce the other panelists right away. Welcome to come and take the stage, Rajiv. Indeed, a privilege to have you here in person. Dr. Upadi doesn't need an introduction. She was here yesterday. She's the Deputy Secretary General, National Health Security Office, Government of Ireland, and she will join virtually. Mr. Bhavani Maurya is the Senior Manager at AVPN's Health Impact Platform and drives the social investors collaborations for health, a partner in crime and also our knowledge partner for the session. Dr. Vivek Prakash, who just decided he had to go virtual. He's the Senior VP and Head CSR, Jubilant Ingriva Limited, and works with corporate social responsibility, leading the Jubilant Bharat Foundation. Welcome, sir. Mr. Karthik Desai again, founder, CEO, and associates in India.
We have got Ashish Sutar.
You've got Ashish Satar. Sorry, I don't have the name here. Sorry, Ashish. Thank you for being a part of the Desai and Associates and representing us here in person. Malti Jaiswal, a senior consultant from the World Bank Group, founder, Inspiring Seniors Foundation, focusing on active and healthy aging. And Malti, it was a privilege to talk to you yesterday, and I think we're all getting there into that mold. Miss Mai Fareed, who's joining us virtually. She's the CEO of Universal Health Insurance Authority, Egypt. While we do have representatives in person over here, it's a privilege to have you virtually, Ms. Fareed. Maulik, this session is yours to take forward.
Thank you, Uma. And thank you, colleagues, for accepting our invite. It's a pleasure to have you here. So, what I'm going to do is to lay out why we designed this session. We are having fantastic sessions since yesterday, talking about various aspects. We had just now on infrastructure. But when we talk about systems resilience, the two or three main aspects which affects health systems response. One, infrastructure we talked about. Second, human resources, which we are going to talk about. And everything which affects human resources as well as infrastructure is money, right? Availability of money. And money, there was a professor, Robert Nock. He had a theory, a control knob theory, that if you want to control certain elements of a system, finance becomes an important tool which can help in shaping behavior of individual as well as institutions. And if you look at any health system, whether we want to affect governance, whether we want to affect supply chain, whether we want to build new infrastructure, financing becomes very, very important. When we say that we want to build a health resilient infrastructure, and we talked about the positives, but it's cost intensive, right? People needs to invest in building that resilient infrastructure. And with each and every country, with having, when we talk about health sector, they always talk about fiscal deficit. We don't have enough money. We don't have enough money to kind of contribute in building infrastructure. We don't have enough money in kind of having more human resources in public health system. I think so. The financial role or the lever becomes even more important to strengthen health system. When it comes to shock, right, everything crumples. The health financing flow crumples. The ability of government to pool resources crumple, to generate resources. And when I say generate resources, that, let's say, if you take India, UK, countries as an example, a lot of money comes from tax finance, right? The tax kitty gets smaller when we have shock. You know, COVID is a classical example where we did not have money. If you don't have money, how are we going to spend money? And that's where the resilience aspect of health financing structures become very, very important if we talk about health system strengthening. And now, if you go add a layer of complexity within public health system, it's easier because we have got, fund flow defined. We have got public financial management systems which know how the fund flows from A to B to Z. But in India, or a mixed health system like India, private sector has got a very, very strong and important role to play. I mean, if you talk about India, more than around 70% of healthcare is access from private healthcare. And their private healthcare expenditure is also driven by individuals in form of out-of-pocket expenditure. And most LMIC, we have got out-of-pocket expenditure as a driver of health expenditure. So when you have shock, how do you ensure that these people would have access to healthcare? And in this situation, how we can make private sector more and more responsive to the needs of institutions and the need of individuals. And that's what we wanted to bring on forth, because there is no second debate or argument that public financing needs to increase across the board. But public financing cannot meet all the demands, and private sector has got a significant role to play in enhancing coverage or the depth of coverage. And that's henceforth we have this expert panel out here who have been in some form involved in developing institution, a private sector institution which lends to a health system. We have got colleagues who brings a couple of private sectors together, again lending and creating instruments to support individual and institution. We have colleague who works on the regulatory aspect. When private sector money comes in, there is always a potential of some not good money coming. I would say bad money, which is otherwise not accountable money coming into the field. How regulatory aspect comes into picture. And then we have a colleague out here who has been working in private health insurance space for almost 40 years. And how this private sector has evolved over a period of time to make both individuals as well as institutions stronger and respond to shock. So this is the outline structure of the panel, and we have got extreme panelists. We have got two government colleagues out on the panel with a perspective that they need to understand, or they are people who decide how this private sector financing helps in strengthening health system. Because private sector is for profit, let's acknowledge that. But within that, how they can contribute so that the profit-earning motive as well as the social objectives meet into system. So we have got Thailand as a classical example, who has committed for universal health coverage, and they have started involving private sector more. And then we have got Egypt, who has got recently 2018 onwards started on a health insurance journey. And what we are doing as part of Indian PMJ. So what is their experience in kind of involving private sector? So this is an outline of the session so far, and I would start with Rajiv Lal, and I think so, as Uma aptly said, that he has been a person who has created an institution, a financial institution, IDFC. So, sir, I come to you, and what is this private institution? How does private institution, when you construct an institution, right? How does in your mind supporting the social objective, or when you lend money to an organization who has got social, well, let's say you lend money to a hospital, right, building a hospital. So, and you what has been experience in kind of designing these instruments or creating those structures which can lend money to these institutions, which ensures accountability as well as flexibility.
Thanks. First, thanks for having me here. It's a real pleasure and privilege to participate in this discussion. I've learned a lot since yesterday. And while you were talking, and I heard other people, I mean Uma's comment about how she hates finance. I raised that somewhat facetiously, because that uh, is just one illustration of the uh, philosophical challenge that we face. So, if you will indulge me, I've spent most of my career actually trying to build this bridge between the public and the private. And I wish I had a blinding insight to share with you that would form the basis for a solution. My learning after many years of effort in this area is that this is extremely hard because um, and it goes to the title of this group and this network. It's a collaborative. It is very hard to build cross-disciplinary collaboration, especially crossing the bridge between private finance and public purpose and public service. And in my experience, you have to fight two things. I mean, one is an instinctive tribal impulse, which has infected every aspect of society and how we organize ourselves. And it's not just, private people don't understand what public good is, or government people don't understand what the private sector is about. It is also within academia. Academia has become so hyper specialized that economists don't talk to anthropologists, don't talk to sociologists, don't talk to political scientists. I mean, and the incentive system, which is at the core of this, is really the fundamental problem. So no academics generally, even in the university I happen to find myself now, are motivated to publish in certain kinds of journals, just to get their tenure and secure their position, and they find themselves becoming less and less relevant often, not always, or they have to work extremely hard to remain relevant for the contemporary public discourse. So there is a fundamental incentive problem to the way we've organized ourselves. Now look at, let me now apply this to what we're talking about today. So you take climate. I've devoted the last few years on trying to understand climate finance and how to use finance as an instrument for inducing behavioral change to deal with the climate challenge, including the climate and health challenge. And what we have learned now with the Trump administration's arrival is that it is going to be virtually impossible to persuade people to change behavior unless your starting narrative is one they identify with their self-interest. So, and being able to communicate with the other party and persuading them to change behavior, you have to have a powerful narrative. And the only way to breach this chasm of lack of trust between the two parties is for one to say to the other, look, I understand your self-interest, so let me meet you where you are. So on trying to introduce broader public good considerations, societal considerations into financial decisions, unless you persuade money that this actually is in their interest, they are very unlikely to engage. And the only way they are engaging, if at all, is if they are forced to by government regulation, right? And designing regulation is again an art. So, the caricature of the debate on regulations to change financial behavior is the comparison between Europe and the United States. Europe is all about regulations. It's all about using the stick to try and change behavior. The US is not interested in climate regulation at all. It is interested in only using subsidies. And as we've seen, in country after country, subsidies are actually more powerful, an incentive. The carrot is more powerful an incentive to change behavior rather than the stick. Because what happens with regulation is it works up to a point. Beyond that threshold, which is hard to determine, it leads to perverse behavior. People start evading regulation, they cheat, they lie. So, in the case of climate finance, you must all be aware about this huge phenomenon called greenwashing. So, greenwashing is companies pretending to be green, respecting climate regulations, but actually not doing anything about it. And this has become a chronic problem against which there has been now a huge rebellion, and financial company after financial company taking the cue from the Trump's administration very raw message is backtracking on these commitments. Right. So now, having sort of shared with you this rather challenging and frustrating, perhaps even bleak context, let me turn to what the solutions can be. And I think there are solutions that are possible, but it requires for this community of people to cast the problem, as I said, in this vocabulary of self-interest. Right. So, what most economic players, certainly profit-oriented private players, fail to recognize is the longer-term context in which they operate. Their perspective is much too short-term. And we've done all kinds of things to exacerbate that problem. Capital markets being, the primary driver of this crime. Capital markets force people and listed companies to think about their prospects on a quarterly basis rather than on a multi-year basis. So, but let's leave that problem aside. So the first challenge is to help change the contours of any conversation to the long term. If you persuade people to think about the long term, then you have a much stronger case to persuade them that social considerations and all these kinds of considerations are actually in their long-term interest. So that's the first one. The second one is to persuade them that their understanding of risk, it's a related point, is much too narrow. And they fail to see the wood from the trees. So I'll give you a very concrete example, which has a big impact on people who think about money. So you've all heard of Warren Buffett. He is a legendary billionaire investor. And he's known for actually being a very thoughtful investor. And he himself recounts an example of how he missed some very obvious risks. So he has been or was a very large investor in American utilities companies, electricity transmission companies. And in working with those companies, his hypothesis was, well, this is a very stable business because people need electricity. Mostly they pay for it. And so this is a long-term, stable, profit-generating company. What he and his management did not see is the need to invest in infrastructure to de-risk the transmission lines from fire hazards. They didn't do it. And that's because they weren't focused on understanding climate risk. And this has had a huge impact on the value of his investment, right? So this is one example. So what has actually happened, and this is despite whatever Trumpians might say, right? Irrevocably, the evidence is now in our face, it's brutally in our face, that the risk from climate change the physical risk from climate change is very real. And so people have begun to take this much more seriously. For example, today, in certain parts of the United States, especially in the coastal areas, it is impossible to get home insurance because of flooding risk. So many people are now shut out of the home insurance market, and this is affecting the real estate industry very significantly. The same thing for fire risk. I think the next step, and it's a matter of time, is that we now have to develop the method and the science. The science exists, the statistical science exists, to bring the broader risks associated with climate into mainstream thinking. And this brings me to the confluence between climate and health. So, we hear again and again that the next pandemic is inevitable. But aside from very few financial circles, unlike where climate risk modeling has become mainstream now, or is becoming very rapidly mainstream, health risk modeling is not yet mainstream. I think that's the next step. It is coming because health consequences have seriously disruptive economic consequences. And so unless businesses or money begins to think about this risk in this manner systematically, they will become more and more vulnerable. So my first fundamental point is that it's a matter of time before health risks are integrated into financial decision making. So that's my first important point. The second point is that it's related. So now that you have the context, it becomes much easier to talk about product innovation. This can lead to innovation in design of health insurance risk. Already we are talking about catastrophe risk insurance, but it is still related only to climate. So farmers insurance related to climate, products are already developing. The next step is to think about catastrophic risk insurance related to health and pandemic risk. So risk modeling. Second is development of insurance product. The third one is that it builds on the previous panel's discussion. The state has to develop its own capacity to respond to this risk. And what we saw in the pandemic is that governments did respond the world over to help financial systems bridge the crisis that was triggered by the pandemic. So they provided huge amount of financial assistance. And so just like central banks have begun to force regulated financial institutions to systematically introduce climate-related issues into their stress testing, the next step would be for the central bank, the Reserve Bank of India, to force financial institutions to integrate health-related stress testing into how they do their risk management at the bank level. And that will mean setting aside more capital. The last point and which is the hardest on innovation in financial products, is that what we've learned is that we need a whole variety of financial products, aside from insurance and risk management, that are able to respond to this need to experiment with how to integrate social considerations into investment decisions. And what is called impact capital, impact investing, is an asset class. It's a way of investing in companies that thinks much more broadly, systematizing broader considerations into an investment decision. So you're not thinking just about quantifying what profit you make, but you're thinking about quantifying what impact you're making for the community. And the basis for that, which is the hardest for business people to actually internalize is to convince business that if you focus narrowly on profit, in the long term, you will get into trouble. But if you think about your purpose, not just as delivering profit for yourselves and your shareholders, but you think about your purpose as serving the community in which you operate, then you are likely to build a business that will be long term, much more sustainable. But that's a war. It's not a battle. I'll stop there.
And thank you for stopping at this point, because I'll respond to on kind of in developed countries, we are doing the health impact assessment as part of any mega infrastructure project. And the one I was taught was when the Heathrow airport expansion was happening, because of the noise pollution and the airport expansion was going towards the community residents and the noise pollution. I think so that project was scrapped. So I think so in developed countries, health impact assessment has become a tool when we are talking about progressivity. But I think so in countries where middle income and LMIC, we still need to go to that way. But from the point that you make, we have got Ashir Sutar with us, and Desai Associates have been instrumental in getting the concept that Rajiv did mention, right? Blended financing, where you get a private equity into social impact programs. So we would like to understand from your response to what Rajiv said, being very honest, because he has asked the questions to you. How are you able to mobilize these resources, right? And how do this impact investor measure the return on investment? Because it might not be a capital gains there to get, but societal gains also. So that's one question. And second question, which I am very keen to understand, is the regulatory space, because money making mandatory is when you make something mandatory, obviously people will try to find a reason of not complying to those mandates, and there are a lot of bad money or kind of black money comes into ecosystem. So how is the regulatory ecosystem responding so that whatever investment comes really makes sense?
Thank you so much. I'm Ashir, and I work at Desai and Associates. We are an impact advisory firm that works on developing and deploying blended finance and outcome-based financing instruments and solutions. And following Rajiv sir's excellent points over here, just laying down the basics of what healthcare financing in India currently is. We are this year's public healthcare budget was $11 billion. That's just under 1 lakh crores. Expenditure about FY24 was 9.1 billion, which means the budget and the utilization for public healthcare is on track and in line. The out-of-pocket expenditure, which is the private sector healthcare expenditure in India, is about 28 billion, which is about a 1:3 ratio of public is to private, total becoming about 40 billion. The addressable health financing gap in India is still about 25 to 30 billion dollars. So that's like the basics of it. 40% of the entire government's healthcare budget goes into one scheme, which is the National Health Mission, which is about 37,000 crores, $4 billion or so, which is quite interesting, by the way, because that is the primary primary source of healthcare delivery in India, especially on the private healthcare sector. Interestingly, in contrast to that, just in the last 18 months to 2 years, India saw $28 billion of private equity capital coming into India in tertiary healthcare. That included investments in hospitals, primarily in hospitals, and a bit of it into advanced pharmaceutical-based initiatives. So again, the total addressable market being somewhere about 25 to 30 billion dollars. The blended finance paradigm, which is now increasingly spoken about approach, it solves three problems. Overall, it solves three problems. One is it just increases the pool of capital that exists. So addressing that the missing gap of 25-30 billion dollars is what blended finance is able to do, because currently capital is segregated or disaggregated across different sources. So you have private equity firms doing what they do. You have impact funds and venture capital funds who together in India is about 20 billion, $70 billion, of which less than 5% goes into healthcare, which is again a very interesting thing because we have somewhere about 6,000 registered health tech startups. This is based on Startup India's and Traxon's data. Less than 5% of them are funded by impact investment or VCs. Then you have about $1.1 trillion of healthcare of total debt markets in India. This is purely banks and NBFCs and MFIs put together. It's the coverage on healthcare is barely anything, and this is healthcare lending. So one is increasing the pool of capital. The second part is making capital more affordable. If today we are saying that 35,000 rupees or 40,000 rupees per person or per capita is the out-of-pocket expenditure, how do you reduce it to 20,000 rupees? So making capital more affordable is one more thing that blended finance is able to do. And the third part is ensuring that whatever investments happen, it happens those investments are accountable for certain outcomes to be met. If investments are going into National AIDS Control Organization, we are looking at, say, if 1,000 people are being covered, 80% are actually being impacted. So the whole point of outcome measured, verified in a practical and cost-effective manner is where the third bit of the problem gets solved. And the way in which this kind of happens is also the fact that there are certain segments in which this is applicable and what investors kind of look at when you are looking into increasing the pool of private sector capital. One is you look at a business model itself. There are certain segments where there is a robust business model that exists, but it is severely underfunded. So how is it that you're going to increase capital flow over there? The second part being, say, or how is it that you're able to expand to new markets, or in the existing markets scale up to new products and services? Today, if somebody is going towards a primary healthcare institution, can you increase the same customer getting access to health insurance? Is the same customer then getting access to secondary healthcare and tertiary healthcare and the investments that go behind that? The second thing that they look at is how is the institution that is receiving capital set up. You have typically credit scores, but you also have things like what is the capital structure of the entity itself. Who are the investors? What's your net worth value and stuff like that? So that's the second thing that investors look at. Third is, very importantly, customer stickiness. Now, healthcare, there used to be a running joke at management institutions that healthcare is the only sector that has zero customer acquisition cost. People actually come to you without you spending any money. So, not that this is true, but there is definitely a low cost of acquisition of customers. The interesting part of that is also the customer stickiness value to it. If one customer enters at one single point of time, they continue to interact with the system at multiple given points of time. This is true with especially tertiary healthcare, where if you enter, say, an Apollo or a Max, you will continue to be with that hospital because you develop a relationship and there's an entire ecosystem that kind of supports that. So customer stickiness is one thing that they do observe. And the fourth thing that they look at is what's the verifiable outcomes. Now, India has taken a good amount of leadership in developing some of these blended finance instruments, structures, and financing mechanisms. The way typically you do it is there are about 7-8 ways in which you do it. One is, say, direct equity investments into healthcare startups itself. It is not well known, but the Gates Foundation actually did an equity investment in 1mg. 1mg is something that most of us are aware of, but they did their investments in Series E, which was somewhere about 2018. The exit was 2020. And Gates Foundation did it through something called as a PRI, which was program related investments. It's another way of deploying philanthropic capital into India, where the expectation is I will get returns, but it is below market rate. Current market rate returns is expected to be, if you are an investor, you will say I need 18% to 25%. The Gates Foundation will say I am happy at 12%, I'm happy at 10%. So this whole mechanism of how foreign philanthropic capital gets into India, direct equity is one way in which you do it. The second way was volume guarantees. So again, Gates Foundation did this volume guarantee thing with Aurobindo Pharma, if I'm not mistaken, is the name of, it's a Hyderabad-based company. They had developed a pill for HIV, and the volume guarantee was for that pill to be bought by LMIC countries. So this was public procurement of different countries of that pill, but the volume guarantee was provided by the Gates Foundation. The third one was credit guarantee. So if you're a healthcare startup who wants to take a loan, but from a banker perspective, you are very risky. So what, say, USAID was able to do was provide a $25 million, 50%, so $25 million of credit guarantees, which unlocked $50 million of capital. This was in 2018 that IndusInd Bank started lending to these kind of companies. At that 25 million, I mean, the $25 million did not get deployed. It was kept as a credit guarantee so that in case of any default, this money will get paid to IndusInd. The fourth way is, say, TA support. Path does some extraordinary work in, now they have a new accelerator program where they're scaling up commercialization of healthcare startups. So that is technical assistance support, providing them a pathway to commercialization, which then will unlock debt and equity capital. So that's another way of it happening. There's one on outcome bonds. India has actually two outcome bonds that have come up in the healthcare space. One was the Utkrisht outcome bond, where it was USAID and MSD for mothers being the primary donors who wanted to figure out how is it that you can increase the accreditation of maternal healthcare hospitals in tier 2, tier 3 cities. And by doing an NABH accreditation, or they developed a new paradigm called Manyata, which was developed by FOGSI. About 400 hospitals were kind of covered over there. And per hospital, they were given somewhere about $18,000 as total payment. They were able to reach somewhere about 450,000 mothers in a span of about 2 years. So that is one part. There was one that USAID did with the government of Madhya Pradesh. It was called the Mukti Impact Bond. That was a very interesting place because we were also then fortunately involved in a design of a scale-up model for this. The idea is there is a weight loss that happens when you are detected with tuberculosis, and the treatment happens. So the weight gain has to be somewhere about 7 kgs. If that doesn't happen, there's a 80% chance that you'll relapse into TB. There's a 50% chance that you will die. So what the specific intervention was doing was starting with screening and moving towards nutrition of TB patients, assuring that over a period of 18 months, the weight gain happens to 7 kgs. And based on that, a certain amount of payment came out. So the total payment in this case was somewhere about 13,000 rupees, no, 13,500 rupees, where 3,500 was for screening of tuberculosis patients and about 9,000 rupees was for the nutrition aspect of it. And the biggest example being Samrid, which is the blended finance facility developed under the PEHEL project by USAID and IP Global. This is a structure in which you provided TA support to a pool of healthcare startups. You also link them to equity investments, further equity investments. You also link them to things like credit guarantees, volume guarantees, returnable grants, which is like zero interest loans that go towards a healthcare startup. And you have something like a social success note. So in this case, what happened was Caspian was the primary lender over there, Caspian Debt, Hyderabad-based company. And they were providing up to, I think, 8%, 5% interest subvention if certain outcomes are met. For example, if you're a healthcare startup that primarily deals with rural people, and you have a gender lens attached to it, that 80% or 50% of my customers need to be women, if those metrics are achieved over a period of the loan duration, you get 5% interest subvention. So which means if you have a 24-month EMI schedule, last three AMIs are kind of waived off. If by the end of the 20th month or something, you are able to showcase these outcomes. So these are like some of the examples in which India has been able to do. On the regulatory challenges, I think that.
Ashok, let me come back to on the regulatory challenges, because
Okay.
I think so regulatory challenges is also resonate with some other speakers. So we want you to respond at that time.
Sure.
And time wise, you've got 8 minutes left. You've got 4 speakers yet, so I'm mindful of time as well. But and these are fantastic, and I think so. Pahel, the way Samrit got evolved as part of Pahel, and I think so. The learnings have been taken up by other now private equity funds, and we know that there is another organization who is working with another organization to mobilize same resources in other ecosystem. So I think so those kind of impact bonds have started making effort. And the biggest outcome that we're seeing, that aggregation of service provider, the Manyata. Now Manyata is also being used in kind of digital adoption as an aggregator, which can bring lot many kind of Foxy player, maternal child health players together. So let me go to Dr. Vivek Prakash. Dr. Prakash, when we talk about private equity, under the corporate social responsibility mandate of Ministry of Corporate Affairs, we are mandated to spend, and it's a word that Rajiv also mentioned earlier, mandatory, right? Now we are mandated to spend some of our money as part of the corporate social responsibility, and we know that a lot of companies are spending on healthcare. Do you think that the way CSR is currently prioritizing health, and the way it's meeting its objectives, is it aligned to overall ecosystem strengthening? In other terms, when such kind of shocks come, or when we talk about flexibility, do you think that this support is able to create that kind of ecosystem?
Thank you. So we listen, bankers, we listen this impact investors perspective also. Now this is the CSR perspective. Actually, this is mandated that 2% of profit, average profit of last 3 years is to be spent on CSR, no doubt. And in the last 10 years, when this act was enacted, we have seen the improvement also. We have seen a lot of amendment also. And this is very good that government is also now realizing some real challenges, and then accordingly they are giving options to company for modifying their nature of investment under CSR also. And in like last year, total spending was around 30,000 crore, and out of that, you won't believe, more than 20%, 22% has been spent on healthcare only. So education is the on the top list, but after education, healthcare is the, and most of the companies are spending on especially on making primary healthcare accessible. But things are changing now, because now government, one side, government is also running fast. Especially we have seen after COVID that government is also working very well to improve their healthcare system. It means private sector need to change and then accordingly modify their nature of projects also. So now we are seeing major investment into providing or equipping public health system. So now, because sometimes in the government hospitals there is issue that they cannot buy ultrasound machine or X-ray or some other equipment also. But this is the like tuberculosis CBNet or other machines also. So now this is the route through which they can, without getting into hassle, they can access those equipment. So this trend is also growing, and now many corporates are also supporting this initiative. But the best part is, if you will if you have to meet the SDG goal, no doubt private sectors are also developing their health infrastructure. Government is also developing. You need a trained manpower for this. And the best part is under skill development program, many companies, under their CSR, they are also supporting the skilling of healthcare worker. That is also a new trend which is coming. And because if you can create hospital, but without manpower, you cannot deal with the health situation. It means you need trained manpower. And the new sector, which is geriatric healthcare, especially the bedside attendant and other, because we are now growing, we are becoming older. The India is no longer will be a young country after 25 years. It means you need manpower to support, and the system to support that situation. So skill development is also new thing, and under skill development, you won't believe this skilling of healthcare worker, especially healthcare worker, is growing, and then they are getting good employment opportunities also. It means CSR is also going in the right direction. But the best part is in the last, especially in the last 3-4 years after COVID, research has become a new area of CSR under healthcare also. So during COVID, many companies invested their money for the research of many kits for the identification, or for the COVID, and for the vaccines also. But after that, we are seeing that many healthcare devices are being invented through CSR fund. So now companies are investing their CSR fund to support such research work. And then academic institutions also. You just see in a city, you will find 1 or 2 medical college. But if you are if you are creating more medical colleges, there is no meaning to create more medical college in one city. It's better to either private or government hospital, medical college. If you are creating in a tier 2, tier 3 cities, it is serving to the surrounding area. So now government is also thinking on that line, and many CSR funds are being utilized for creating such medical colleges also. So it means this is also growing, and we are on right path. And I think government is also understanding. That's why they are giving space to take decision to modify the CSR project, and accordingly spend on healthcare also. In many in fact, projects of healthcare, not only just primary or preventive healthcare, but also on developing infrastructure, research and development. And again, impact investment is another thing. So now through incubation center, many corporates are investing CSR fund into research and supporting startups to, like at Jubilant in Gravia also, through our foundation, we created an incubation center. And through that, we are, at least in our portfolio, out of 15, 4 are under healthcare. And they are doing a lot of developing many products. It means lot of opportunities are there, and there is opportunity for innovation also under CSR. So many companies are now adopting. So I think we are on right path, and certainly through this, and CSR is giving good space to do research, because under public fund or government fund, there is some restriction. They cannot take immediate decision. But under CSR, the decision is fast, and then the monitoring is also fast. So it means we can achieve those goals immediately. So it's we are on right path. In my view, we are on right path, and this will add lot of value to this country.
Thank you very much, Dr. Prakash. And I think so. Initially, I said, two main important of health system strengthening is money, availability of money, and human resources. And you are touching upon how CSR is strengthening the availability of quality human resources to our health sector is very, very pivotal in making health systems stronger and sustained. Let me go to Bhavani now. And Bhavani also works a lot on aggregating private sector investment. And now there has also been kind of interest on philanthropies and government supported research institutes to fund research in LMIC. And especially on innovative. Now, climate for me is still a new topic. We have been talking about it for past 2 or 3 years. It was not there, and it has shifted the behavior of donor agencies also. So, what has been your learning? Because I know you work on climate financing, and there is a recent investment from UK government's research arm in kind of LMIC. So what has been learning? Why are they prioritizing kind of investment in LMICs on newer topics, and what is the reason behind that? Which other like CSRs or philanthropic organizations can learn?
Thank you so much, Malik, and it's great to be part of this panel and hearing experts talk about various ways of financing and what are the challenges which right now financing and specifically innovative financing is addressing. I'm from an organization called AVPN, and we are one of largest social investors network in Asia, looking at mobilizing resources, which is human capital, intellectual capital, and financial capital towards various thematic areas. And post COVID, we adopted a platform approach where we started looking at gender, climate, health, youth, and livelihoods in a platform manner, and bringing much more focus to specific causes and issue areas in these thematic areas. Now, in this, the most important element, as you had mentioned, that why, for example, climate focused investors are looking at different areas as well, is the intersectionality element and the impact of climate on health, be it on human health or health infrastructure. And as so I'm from the health impact platform at AVPN, and we've adopted a I would say a value chain based approach where the concept is to look at a role of financing and specifically looking at role of philanthropic capital as to how it can be catalytic in activating financing in a blended finance approach, or bringing in impact investors to the cause, or bringing in DFIs or MDBs to specific thematic areas. And we kickstarted this effort with support of Welcome Trust, where we're looking at right now late stage R&D and commercialization for specifically infectious diseases, and where climate induced infectious diseases is one of the focuses, at looking at what are those financial instruments and innovative financing instruments which can be looked at when it comes to bridging the gap of financing in infectious diseases. Some of the examples, as Asher has shared, are across healthcare, but how we can bring those learnings to infectious diseases per se. And so in the value chain, once you have effective investments around the research, there is a need for investments around then scaling of such solutions which require support. And in that support, where we've launched Climate and Health Lighthouse Fund, which right now primarily in the first round looks at on granting, which is direct granting of philanthropic funds, but also eventually then looking at how this particular philanthropic money can be utilized for activating impact investing and commercial financing. With leading to, as Dr. Rajiv had also mentioned, that there is difficulty in bringing stakeholders together to bridge this financing gap. And AVPN plays that neutral platform, because as Sir had mentioned, that there is lack of trust as well when it comes to investors or other types of capitals looking, and also bringing in ecosystem builders in form of governments. That is also an important stakeholder, CSOs coming in and bringing that collaborative approach and a collaborative collaborative approach to bring stakeholders together to then work on accessing or addressing barriers to access to healthcare, which is looking at life-saving medicines, building capacities for health workforce, building up capacities for health infrastructure, and how we can bring them together and then address multiple gaps, financing being one.
Yeah, thanks, Pawan. I think so. It resonates with the theme also, collaboration, right? If you don't collaborate, I think so there is a lot of redundancy that comes in, and it's not effective use of always a stringent availability of capital. Let me go to Malti. Malti, you have been listening to this, right? But when we talk in health sector, right? Health sector behaves or understands bit differently, right? When we talk about access to healthcare and out-of-pocket expenditure, everything comes to accessibility and affordability. And one of the tool that government of India has been using now is PMJ, where tax-funded health insurance. But again, when we are talking about changing ecosystem, right? Adaptability. How are new products being introduced as part of it so that people get access? And how is private sector? Because private sector, we heard that they need return of capital, and lot of investment that, or lot of packages may not have return of capital. In that case, how do we enhance our repertoire of reimbursements available? And what have been your thoughts working both at private sector and public sector and being one of the focal point at NHA while designing PMJ?
Yeah, thank you, Maulik. And a lot of, I think, good points and valid points have been made by Rajiv and Ashish and others. I would just add a couple of things to what has been the experience of, PMJ and the private health insurance. So PMJ definitely, and even before PMJ, state health insurance schemes have been there for a long time. RSBY was there for a long time, and PMJ has kind of aggregated the whole ecosystem into one platform. And because of the IT platform and the whole ecosystem of PMJ has kind of aggregated. So what it has definitely helped is the resilience at the bottommost level, right? Definitely access to care has improved. You look at the utilization in private hospitals, it is really, really, I mean, remarkable. Around 60% of the utilization is in the private hospitals. And definitely, a shock like COVID, for example, it would have really had far more devastating impact had PMJ and the instrument like that wasn't available. And even PMJ stepped into, though it's a inpatient care scheme, in India we have all the insurance products are inpatient care. The logic being, let's save the catastrophic health expense, even though the other one may be equally killing. I could say that. But then they even included, the COVID testing package, for example, because it was beyond the cost of a, normal person to that time the testing was expensive also. So I would say that it is definitely working. It may not be the most ideal way. There may be leakages, there may be issues about enrollment and hospital empanelment and all those. But I think if you look at a high level, at a 35,000 feet level, definitely it is making a positive impact to the bottommost people. And then it is also creating opportunities for small hospitals. For by demand aggregation, it is also helping the though there is so much of talk about tertiary care investments and all that, but the small hospitals also need to be supported, and schemes like this create demand for them, right? So there is a support to the supply side also. Coming to the private health insurance, I mean, they are definitely driven by their stakeholders and the investors board, responsibility to the board. But then they have also, we insurance is a regulated industry in India. Healthcare is not, like, I mean, there is no provider regulator in India, but insurance is regulated industry. So that way there is a lot more rigor that goes into in managing this industry, in managing the policy holders funds, because that's the public money that they sit over. And they I wouldn't say, being from the insurance industry, I wouldn't say that we are the most efficient industry. I mean, management expenses and distribution expenses are way high than what should be in what is there in the developed markets, but we still are doing a reasonable job in the given circumstances. And they are also what has happened is that mortality and morbidity are two things which insurance industry works on. Mortality is fairly defined. Morbidity is what is getting very unpredictable with these events happening. Like COVID, there was no actuarial data how to price a product like that, or how to absorb this shock on the books of the insurance companies, because the cost of care jumped really anything, isolation wards, PPE kits and whatnot, the claims cost goes up. So there is no data to support the pricing. But then even then, and there was a lot of tug of war between the hospitals and the insurance company, which is a continuing saga, like that. But then they also realize that they have to have the social responsibility also. This is not the time to talk about the fine print in the policy, or the fine that this is. So policies always have exclusions, right? Policy will always have limitations, and within those limitations, I think it was a good job. And they quickly came up with another product called COVID Kavach, that because if your normal policy is not adequate, you could quickly buy it. So that was also a very innovative thing. But then ultimately it's the customer who will bear the price, right? Even though they rose up to the occasion. Now, for example, Delhi and Mumbai already have high premium rates compared to the rest of India because of the cost of care here being high. Now I believe that Delhi policyholders are now going to pay 15% more for the pollution, right? They are nowhere responsible for it, but they would end up paying a higher premium than the rest of the country because pollution has become a very apparent issue, which is bleeding the insurance companies claims book. So these are some of the things which are which are interestingly evolving. And I think now I work for the senior citizens, and then I believe that that they also bear the brunt of the insurance premium of senior citizens is way beyond affordable limits, way beyond affordable. So PMJ has stepped in and given cover to 70 plus people, but I feel the best de-risking for them is to be resilient themselves and have healthy aging as a way of life, and then fall back on the other mechanisms to the extent that they can.
Thank you very much, Malti. Interesting, because from what you said, I was planning of moving out of Delhi after 4 years, and with the 15% premium rising, so I have another impetus to move out of Delhi soon. So thank you, Malti, and that's the challenge, right? Putting non-absorbable cost in your books at the end of the year when shock comes, and I think so. One of the reason for NHS going bankrupt in 2010 was some of the recommendation of inclusion as part of the budget, and the money was not. And I think so. NICE has to NHS had to go to under reform after 2010. So point well taken. So now let's we heard a lot of things from private sector. What are the opportunities and what are the challenges? Let's move on to our government folks, and we'll try to be quick. I know we have already exceeded our 1 hour. Dr. Yupadi Sirinsuk. Thailand has been kind of one of the pioneer as far as announcing universal health coverage, and they have also now recently started incorporating or enhancing the role of private sector. What has been your experience in the way now Thailand's health system is evolving to make systems stronger, and how financing lever is supporting that?
Okay, thank you. Excuse me, I cannot share my slide. I have one slide for you. Is it possible that I share?
Yes, please. Can we share the slide? Yeah,
Okay.
it should be there, ma'am. It should be there.
Okay, it's coming.
Yeah.
Everyone see, right?
We can see it here. Thank you. Can you make on the full screen, please?
Okay.
Yeah.
I just have only one slide for us to share. Okay. Thank you for the organizer that invite me to share our experience in this meeting. First of all, I would like to put on some background that universal health coverage in Thailand began in 2002, and now maybe more than 20 years. Some background information for you, that the National Health Security Fund budget is done from the government or general tax and managed by the National Health Security Office that I work for, with a focus on providing quality care, effective coverage, and especially we have to contain the cost also. So Thai universal health coverage needs no co-payment at all, even just a little $1 if they voluntary to pay. So the budget for all the universal health coverage scheme member is estimated using the PQ of price and quantity approach, which rely on data from beneficiary database, utilization pattern, and epidemiological information. After developed, the proposed budget require approval from the National Health Security Board before being submitted to the cabinet for the final approval. So all the budget that we use now today, around 200,000 million baht. You can calculate to the US dollar. After we got the permission from the government for downstream allocation, the government set the universal health coverage budget on the cost and cost containment principle. So, and we also use several provider payment method. So in both private or public health facility, they got the same payment pattern from the NSSO. How to contain the cost? We have several mechanism. First, maybe it start from the benefit package listing. The process of this key element trying to efficient the resource allocation and maximize health outcome based on evidence and stakeholder input is prioritized on cost-effective, safe, and accessible intervention. The process involves the topic nomination, prioritization, and assessment with final decision made by the National Health Security Board. So not all the thing that have in the world can access into our benefit package. We have so many process to scrutinize. Just only one who have the cost-effective services, or even they don't have any cost-effective study. If their cost or maybe their cost is lower than the with lower cost with higher or same outcome, maybe we introduce this benefit into our scheme also. But however, the development of the USC health benefit package, we start for more than 20 years, as I mentioned. Now today we might find that some benefit package maybe we call it that low value care. Sometimes we have to think about how to eliminate that kind of services from our benefit package scheme. And the third one is about the provider payment method. The provider payment method in the universal health coverage scheme play a very critical role in ensuring cost containment and equitable access. So our principle is that we call the cost end method. It's a principle utilized, including capitation for outpatient care and PNP is mean prevention and promotion services, and the primary care services that we have to use the capitation basis. And for the inpatient care, we use the DRG or this diagnosis related group. So we can control because it's in like a global budget for the IP. You might interested in our new intervention we call the innovative health unit that we invite all the private sector like a private clinic, private pharmacy. We have the like a 7 type of the private health facility join us in 2024 last year. In this case, we use like a fixed fee schedule to pay them. Under the fixed fee schedule, it must have the process of negotiation, the price, the reimbursed price for them. So when they satisfy with this kind of fee schedule, fixed fee schedule, they join us in the system. Now today we have like a more than 13,000 health facility in like an innovative health unit in Thailand around the country, not just only in the urban, maybe in the rural area also. However, when we pay for the fixed fee schedule, it might cause some problem about the budget because we cannot control the queue, the quantity of the services. So now today we have some problem with the budget limitation also. However, this kind of services for like a 7 type of innovative health unit, we also like to try to make the people who has less opportunity to access the hospital, the big hospital, due to the crowded and very high travel cost. So we introduce this kind of thing. However, the outcome of the project is still on the process of monitor and evaluated. Last but not least is about the community-based community health fund. We have this kind of, we might encounter the risk of, we think that is the right of the community to join in the National Health Security. So in National Health Security Act, we mandate one article in 47 articles. So it's the right of the community to join in the National Health Security system. So they can join us by matching some money with the National Health Security Fund, and they can use this fund to solve the problem in their community, in their area, in their local area. However, with cost and budget, we might encounter with the risk of underserved. Under services, additional payment with like a quality indicator. If they do some services that high quality than other, they may pay added for the reimbursed price. And not this thing, we have also like we have the campaign consumer service hotline and strict control about the quality control, and we have pre and post auditing and collaborating with the hospital accreditation institute to control and to make sure that the services are high quality care. So this is the last one is about the price negotiation mechanism. We are also trying to make like a more efficient use of our money. For example, we have like a central procurement. We in case of the pharmaceutical and medical supply, so we can save a lot of money in this process also. However, the thing is might be the transparency of the process. So we trying to use this together with other stakeholders. And the last thing is about we trying to use our domestic innovation product. This thing we call like a pay once, benefit three way. That means that the budget we use to the USC scheme once paid will improve the health of beneficiary, support local innovation, and stimulate the country economy also. So this might be the thing that Thailand experience trying to do the efficiency of the money, trying to use the strategic financing mechanism to sustain our system and resilient our universal health coverage. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rupadi. I think so it's fantastic, and there's a lot of learning from Thailand. I know, Mrs. Mai, we only have 5 minutes, so we'll come back to if there are any questions. But Mrs. Fai from Egypt, who was kind of spearheading the Egyptian health insurance scheme, we wanted to understand from her, because when the scheme started was 2018 and it took off in 2019-20, and it's the time when COVID hit, right? How this insurance scheme was able to respond to the challenges in kind of setting up new priorities and coming up with this shock. How did the design change? And sorry, Mrs. Farid, I only have 3 minutes left with me. The organizer on my throat. So if you can be kind of short on that, it will be very, very helpful.
No, that's totally fine. Thank you so much. I know we're running late and I'm the last one, but thank you for the kind invitation, and I will be very brief. Talking about the system and having some sort of flexibility for the programs to work in times of shocks like COVID, to maintain healthcare delivery shocks, the UHI system utilized several financial mechanisms in Egypt. First, we worked on the risk pooling, consolidating funds across different population groups, helped to distribute financial risks and ensured stable resources. Also, we worked on flexible budgeting by allocating contingency funds allowed for quick adjustments in response for emerging healthcare needs. the strategic purchasing, engaging multiple providers and negotiating outcomes-based contracts ensured service were adaptable and cost-effective. Also working on public-private partnerships, leveraging partnerships that enhance the capacity, especially for diagnostics and specialized care. Also the advanced financial planning, like for proper financial planning, including forecasting future needs and estimating the emergency costs, enhance the program's ability to handle major crisis effectively. And last, flexible resource allocation the ability to allocate resources flexibly allows for quick redistribution of funds across different health programs and services, such as redirecting more resources to hospitals or purchasing medical equipment during those kind of emergencies. By combining all of the of what I've just mentioned with strategic planning, phased implementation that we had on our program, and adaptable financial framework, UHI scheme demonstrated resilience and adaptability during the crisis of the COVID and while advancing the healthcare access for Egypt's population.
Thank you very much. That was fantastic, short and sweet. I know there are a lot of questions in the audience also, but and you want to respond last minute, but I said that we can have this conversation over lunch. But so thank you very much, panelists. And by the time you go and she introduce my last comment, this is what we heard from the session is that a public-private partnership, if we need to build trust, right? There are kind of people who are ready to invest. But what Malti did mention also that investment is still in tier 1, tier 2. We need to go beyond tier 1, tier 2 to tier 3. But obviously there needs a value proposition. What Dr. Al also mentioned earlier, that there needs to be a value proposition for investors to come in. And what we heard from Egypt was you need to have flexibility to absorb shock, and we need to bring multiple things together. And what we heard from Thailand was, again, it needs a structured approach for designing programs, and obviously you need to keep on innovating in kind of enhancing more and more programs to be integrated. I know I'm fast. We would need next time more than 1.5 hours to have this session if you have got 7 speakers, and we should keep in mind. Thank you very much, panelists, to be here, and it was a pleasure moderating it.